What's going on, guys and girls? How you doing today? It's Singer Roleplayer once again, and today I want to show you one of the most iconic builds in the history of Path of Exile. I still like this build and I still play it even nowadays after all the nerfs, and this is the Earthquake Juggernaut build. Now surprisingly, the build is still very viable even after all the nerfs, and recently even the increased area of effect was slightly increased on this, so it's got a little better after the big hits it took in the previous nerfs, so it's not that bad now, and it still packs pretty decent amount of damage, as you can see. Now this kind of old set, the whole setup was kind of assembled itself during the Ascendancy League, and this is when the Earthquake gem was introduced, as well as the Ascendancies and the Juggernaut itself, and the whole setup kind of build itself, and is one of the most popular builds in the whole Ascendancy League and Ascendancy expansion. And when you ask for a build in general on the game and the forums and the Reddit, whatever, people will most likely tell you to play Earthquake Jag, which is well like AQ Jag. And whenever we ask people like say, hey, go pay AQ Jag, man, hey, AQ Jag, okay, AQ Jag can do everything. And this is also when the laboratory was introduced, which and the Uber Lab and all that shit, and people started looking for a very tough build to go through the lab mindlessly, farming Izaro and doing lab enchantments, and this build walked like a total breeze. It was super smooth, and obviously this is one of the another reasons why it was so effective, and increased area of effect was absolutely massive on these hits, and another reason why it was so fucking popular. Now, how the build holds on right now, I can tell you that I killed Shaper with the build, even though it was the longest kill ever that I've ever had. I still could do it, and the Guardians is not really a problem. You can kill the Guardians as well as the Elder, of course. It's not a big deal at all. So the build is still very viable even up to this date. The AoE is pretty fine, and if you go with the serious disfavor route with the bleed and stuff and hemophilia, the popping effect of this and basically destroys all mobs on screen. There's also multiple ways how you can build around this right now, because there are many different gear available. You can go with the staffs route with something like the Hegemony's era, or the new Disintegrator staff that drops from the Elder. You can also go maces like the classic Tidebreaker build with the maces, and you can go crit with either the Enemy's Divine, Stormwall, or a Hegemony's Era with a melee crit. Or you can go Resolute Technique with the Serious Disfavor, something like Hasmon's. So basically axes, staffs, and maces are all good for this build. So let's take a look further, and I will tell you about the pros and cons of the build and what can you expect from it in 2018 and beyond. For the pros of the build, I would say that the AoE and overall the damage is very nice still, even after all the nerfs. It's like, you know, a one-button version of Sunder, even though Sunder packs quite a punch on the bosses, and Earthquake is kind of weak for the bosses because their attack speed is pretty low. But for mapping a process and for all the map bosses in general, it's not really a big deal. You basically just hit once and hit hard, and this aftershock deals tremendous amount of damage still. Even with all the new gems and new stuff that is in the game, it packs quite a punch. You can stack a lot of things. You can get Onslaught, you can get Unholy Might with the jewels, and overall the damage is very nice, and the clear speed is nice, and the AoE is pretty nice. But another pro of the build is this: definitely the build is still incredibly tough, because you run with 8 endurance charges and can give it even more if you go with the Death's Door boots and something like Lucky Corruptions, which gives you more endurance charges. The regen and the toughness and physical mitigation is absolutely crazy like always it was. And so Uber lab farming is still incredibly smooth with this build. It's still an incredible lab farmer. You literally walk through all the maps. You stand face to face with the Zara and tank everything. There's also a very impressive amount of leech with Carnage Heart, and I'll explain in the detail. So basically you can tank all content in the game except maybe Shaper and the Guardian Cities, where you can be a little sketchy, but otherwise it's not a problem at all. It's very strong and it has quite a bit of toughness in it. For the cons of the build, I would say that the single target is definitely lacking if you compare it to Sunder or something ridiculous like Blade Flurry, Reef, whatever. There are many good melee skills right now. They do tremendous amount of single target, but this skill was not really always about single target, and after the nerfs it kind of hurt the build too much in my opinion. That's why single target is a bit of a struggle in the very end game, but it's still pretty decent, just not as good as some other skills as well. The clear speed is not really also the absolute fastest because there's no whirling blades, there's no shield charging with a ridiculous amount of attack speed, and this build is not about attack speed, it's about hitting very hard and packing high one hit damage. That's why in general it's not the absolutely fastest mapper in the world as well. It's also a bit problematical on the resistances as well, because your resistances are not they're very high because you're running with Calm's Way and some uniques. That's why you know, resistance, it's very hard to cap. Like on your stat page you will be around like 75 to 80, and endurance charges will give you the rest of the resistance, will be like 30 plus of resistance, which is okay, but not the you know, crazy amount as you could get from the other classes and other builds potentially. Let's take a look at Path of Building, guys. I will guide you for all the shit and let you know how would you level up and what first things you need to take. So we start this and take life here on the top. Then we transition here, go up, then go left. Try to get these strength nodes. Basically the first thing we need to reach is this, which is the Master of the Arena, Bravery, and Art of the Gladiator, because it gives you tremendous amount of attack speed. Then transition down below here, grab the Fat, Golem's Blood, Life Notes, and you can also start getting the first DPS, which will be the Wrecking Ball, because it gives you attack speed. After this, try to gathering more endurance charges. This is where you will be mostly farming, start farming lab, and this is where you will need your endurance charges to work for you. Endurance charges here, transition into more life here on top, transition into more endurance charges here on top. Get Resolute Technique as early as possible, and around level 60 to 70 you will be grabbing all this Fat Life Wheel here on the right, and around 80 to 90 you will be grabbing DPS X-Notch, which are Cleaving and Slaughter. You need to get everything of this. From 85 to 90, this is mostly the jewel slots already, and also the last DPS, which could be the Executioner, the last life nodes here, last life nodes here. That's basically it. Also the last will be around Amplify. However, you can take Amplify early on because it dramatically increases your area of effect as well. So that's about it. Like I mentioned, start here, try to get up down here and grab Master of the Arena and the Gladiator, then basically life, then start packing damage near the end game. That's about it. For the skills in general, Earthquake is a very interesting skill because it deals damage in two phases. There is an initial impact here, which is tied to your attack rate, and the faster you attack, the more initial impacts you do. And then after initial impact, there goes the Aftershock that deals 50% more damage. So basically, the build itself is not really about hitting fast like Sunder, for example, or Blade Flurry or Frost Blades or anything else. It's about hitting hard and finding the balance between your attack speed with initial impacts as well as the upcoming Aftershocks. So you don't really need to attack very fast. That's the whole deal. You need to attack strong. You need to punch a very strong, fast hits. And in order to Aftershock to happen more often, we are using less duration enchantment on our helm, as well as less duration gem on our sixth ring. That's how we get these two in line, guys. For the items, I would go over them in my endgame build section, but I will go really quick over this. So basically, like I mentioned, there are many multiple ways how you can play the build with an axis, with the maces and stuff. Right now, I think I settled up on the Disfavor at Series X as one of the best DPS options, because it gives tremendous amount of DPS, gives attack speed, which is really important, and also gives weapon range, which is great because the AoE of Earthquake has been nerfed 2 times, and also gives you a chance to bleed on hit, which is extremely great because we can scale bleeding, we can put Bloodlust on our Ancestral Warchief, and it works like a charm with the Hemophilia Serpent Scale Gauntlets as well, popping shit left and right. So I would settle up on that Series Disfavor, maybe even though it will be one of the most expensive choices for you. For the helmets, Devoter's Devotion, this is no-brainer, 30% reduced Earthquake duration. Starconia's Head is also a fantastic option here. If you get one for cheap, then buy Starconia's, you will also get a little less attack speed and no move speed, but you will get over 100% 100 life, which is extremely good for your life pool. For the belt, for the armor, this is Bell of the Beast, no-brainer. For the gloves, there are actually 2 options here, or even 3 options here. Hemophilia is what I use for speed farming. When you kill bleeding enemies, they explode and deal damage based on their life. This is incredibly strong for speed farming, and every Slayer with Cyclone uses this, and I also use this as well. For bosses, I switched sometimes to this gloves because it will give you more resistance, more life. But for speed farming, a Hemophilia is literally all you need. For the boots, there's many options as well. Cam's Roots are no-brainer, and you should get 60% increased attack speed enchant on your boots. These are incredibly strong for both mapping and bossing as well. Gives you a tremendous amount of life. At the same time, you can also use the Lich Boots. The Lich Boots, guys, I totally forgot the name. I will remind it later. So the Lich Boots are extremely good because you can get 2 free sockets, and you can put your Immortal Call in this. I will also list it in the written section as well. So the Lich Boots will 2 different duels and 2 sockets are extremely good. The Bubonic Trails, this is how they call it. Sorry guys, I forgot. So Bubonic Trails are really solid options as well for mapping when you don't really care about high life pool. Bubonic Trails are extremely strong as well. For the amulet, I strongly recommend to go with Carnage Heart. You know, I tried to run with Duresa's Salute, but Duresa's Salute has no leech on them, even though it gives slightly more damage. But Carnage Heart is really all that matters, because this is literally all your leech. You know, we're not Slayers, we're not leeching thousands, but you know, this life on hit is absolutely priceless, and this is why we can tank bosses entirely. This is very, very important. Another ring is Calm's Way. This can be pretty expensive. After the Rider's Fire meta hit, the fan, basically Calm's Way price has skyrocketed. It's now like 2 exalts, 1 to 2 exalts. It's extremely expensive. It can be acquired through the Prophecy, to upgrade Prophecy, but this ring is really crazy because we run with 8 Enron charges. This gives you us only 4% of maximum life region. This is insane. Another ring is basically just resist with life, and also one of the most important things is to get physical attack damage leached as mana. For one reason, this is one of the only sources that we have to recover our mana, because we do not have this, guys, we do not have this, we don't have this and this. We are not Slayers, we're not reaching this nodes over here. That's why we need some source of mana leech, and that's why, or one of the reasons why we can't really do the no leech maps as well. For the belt, there's giant amount of options. There can be Belt of the Deceiver, Perseverance, Magnate. It can be, I know, it can be so many different things, and all of these are actually very good. That's why you can run with absolutely any belt. But I have this absolutely insane, crazy resistance belt that I have from fucking trillion of ages ago, and so far I haven't really found any substitute to this because it's just so fucking strong. It has crazy amount of global phase, life, over 130 resist, which is absolutely insane. So this is a GG belt that I ran. I will go over the flasks later on, but so far you can see that I have Taste of Hate, Lion's Roar, Sulfur, A Serious Promise, and Blood of the Curry as a recovery. For the two jewels that we have in the tree, this is where the trick interesting part is. Basically they are just life with damage as well as chance to gain Onslaught and Unholy Might. This is a very interesting jewels, and 80% chance to gain Onslaught and kill, and paired to of this I get 8% chance to gain Unholy Might on kill. This basically saves me tremendous amount of flasks management, and I can not buy 2 more flasks because I have this on kill, and this is all very reliable. 8% is reliable amount to get Onslaught and Unholy Might on kill. This is extremely strong jewels, guys, and I strongly recommend you to get this. Another thing that I want to mention is the Ancestral Warship, because we're on 2 6-links. One 6-link here, I will explain it in detail later on with my endgame build section, but as you can see, there's Earthquake, Malefice, Ruthless, Conk Effect, damage on full life and less duration, which is extremely important for the aftershock damage. The Ancestral Warship should be like this. This is a very big amount of damage. As you can see, it even does more damage than our Earthquake. That's why Ancestral Warship is literally 50% of all our damage. He should not be ignored. Equip your Ancestral Warship like yourself. He should be equipped with Maim, Conk Effect, Ruthless, Malefice, and Bloodlust. Bloodlust is for a reason, because we're using that Serious Disfavor that gives us 25% chance to bleed on hit, as well as Hemophilia, another 25% chance to bleed. This gives us very effective bleed against most of the bosses, most of the enemies in the game. That's why for mapping I use Bloodlust. Sometimes for the bosses, for the end game, for the Shaper, I switched Bloodlust for faster attacks and added fire, but it's not really that important since you can bleed Shaper as well. The other is mostly mobility, lip slam, faster attacks, fortify, endurance charge, and melee stun that gives us an additional chance to get endurance charges, although it's not really crazy. And one of the most important things is to get vulnerability on your Hemophilia gloves, and overall in any gloves, try to get gloves with vulnerability, because we're literally doing a lot of physical damage on us. So this is very important. For the rest of the skills I will explain you guys in detail in the endgame build section. That's about it for the Path of building. For the jewels, like I said, try to get one with a lot of life as well as Onslaught and Unholy Might. If you're lacking intelligence, there is one trick that I will explain in the endgame build section as well, which will help you get the necessary amount of intelligence with very low investment. For early leveling, there's many different options, but the most favorite ones is using Sunder. At level 12 you get Sunder, and level with Sunder faster attacks and Malefice damage to about level 28. This is where you get your Earthquake. Pair Earthquake with a less duration, basically melee damage, and then increase area of effect, and you'll be doing a decent amount of damage. For your this is also when you'll be stunning your Ancestral Warship with faster attacks, increased area of effect, and everything else. For the weapons, you know, it's basically any X of the mace, and from Screaming Eagle to Moonbender Wings, into the Relentless Fury, into Calm's Primacy, Hasmon's Bloodlust, Nagamaho's Flame. There's giant amount of access that you can use also in the very end game before you will save enough money to goose at serious disfavor. The two best kind of options are Calm's Primacy and Hasmona's Bloodlust, with Bloodlust being the coolest because it also leeches you physical attack damage as life. In the past, Maroki Erki was also one of the strongest options because it is literally like one elk, one alteration weapon, and even though it has penalties like reduce attack speed and reduce movement speed, it's still incredibly strong. It does tremendous amount of physical damage, and for such a cheap weapon it does a lot of damage to the bosses. For the bots, there can be also crazy amount of options. You can use Red Blade Trampers for damage, life and move speed. You can use Wake of Destruction for lightning damage. You can use Sundance for increased attack speed. Basically there's many different options as well. For the gloves, any rare gloves, and you can also use Hemophilia at level 43. That's about it. For the helm, just start saving for Devotee's Devotion. It will not be very cheap in the beginning of the league, but it's a very cheap option in general. Don't forget about Starcornia's head as well. So Devotees and Starcornias are your two best bets as well. For the very early game, however, you can use something like let me find it. Yeah, Date Bell gives physical damage to attacks, but you cannot leech one in your own low life, but this increases a lot of damage. So basically for any fizz damage build, this is priceless. Also, you can use the Azimuth pick. It gives you resolute techniques but increases global fizz and gives you maximum life as well. And also Joffrey's Crest is very strong because it can help you with resist as well. So there's many options. None of these are really kind of required to play the build and level up. Basically up to the maps, it's kind of random shit before you start getting your Kaoms, your belly, and start saving money for your at serious disfavor. That's about it. For the end game, you will be mostly likely looking at these items and gear skills, guys. Your end game armor will be the Belly of the Beast with 40% increased maximum life. Always buy a 40% increased life belly for you. And the 6th link on your either Ancestral Warchief or Earthquake will be like this. For the Warchief, this is the Ancestral Warchief, melee fist damage, Bloodlust support, Conk effect, and maim support, and the last one must be either Ruthless or faster attacks, depending on how much colors you have on your belly. Like 5 reds is not really that hard to get, but it's a bit more problematical than getting the blue, the green and the blue. So I kind of don't have another Ruthless, so I'm using faster attacks here, but Ruthless will be absolutely perfect here. For endgame bossing, I also dropped potentially dropped something like this for the added fire, and basically that's about. I added Bloodlust for added fire. That was it, because you know you can't really bleed that much on the end game sometimes, so and the bleeds expire fast, so added fire instead of Bloodlust for those that you can bleed will be also very good. For the Earthquake, this is Earthquake, melee fist damage, Ruthless support, increase area of effect in case of speed farming, or Kong effect in case of bossing, as well as damage and full life and less duration. These two are pretty important. These are two most important ones because we are mostly be on full life because we'll be leeching crazily with the Carnage Heart, and less duration is incredibly important, like I said, for aftershocks. This is where the aftershocks are this. So you can see this with less duration, it's much more often. If we drop less duration, it will be like this. See, that's a huge delay. And when we attack multiple times, we'll be using much less aftershocks that we actually need. And with aftershocks, it will be like this. We're literally spamming both. That's why it's so important. For the gloves, it's hemophilia with the vulnerability corruption. This is very, very important for buffing your dips. Unfortunately, I'm on standard right now and I can't really buy vulnerability ones because they're extremely expensive, like 7 exiles. But I'm trying to buy a lot of hemophilias and corrupt them myself to get the desired vulnerability corruption. I only have temporal chains for now, but vulnerability is the thing that you need to have on this. A hemophilia paired with Arthritis favorite bleed gives you a 50% chance to bleed. That's why you get tremendous amount of bleed damage and tremendous amount of explosions as well from all these kills. For the boots, there are 2 great options that I personally use, which are Calm's Woods with the 60% increased attack speed and cast speed enchantment, and the second one is the Bonic Trails, and it doesn't really matter whether we have 2 or 3 sockets on this. I just have the 2. So on the Bonic Trails, you must have your Immortal Call with cast wound damage taken, a very, very high level Immortal Call, and very, very high level cast wound damage taken, because we should only proc this under very special circumstances when you take incredibly strong melee hit. This is where we need this. As for the jewels, we will be having just basically life and different types of jewels, because Bubonic Trails work like this: 10% increased damage for each type of abyss jewels affecting you. And since we mostly will have the Murderous Eye jewels, that's why we need something else, which is actually quite a problem, because the other jewels mostly roll with kind of minion damage and shit. That's why I found one Searching Eye jewel, which is kind of useful. It gives me life damage to attacks and 1% of life regen per second while moving. Another one can be something like this, which gives you life and all resistance, with just Ghastly Eye jewel. But I still prefer this. So like I said, I use a lot of this and this both. But for bossing, kind of this enchantment is extremely strong, and I don't have my enchantment on Bubonic Trails. That's why I'm using Calm's Roots a lot. For the belt, like I mentioned, there's tremendous amount of options, but I have this. It gives me tremendous amount of life and resists. And for the ring, this is mostly the ring with resists life and attack damage leeches mana. Another one is Calm's Way, and Carnage Heart is absolutely mandatory in my opinion for all the end game, and basically the mapping, the smooth mapping and bossing as well. This is very important. For the helm, there are 2 options: Tarcornius Head with a reduced epic duration, and Devotus Devotion with a reduced epic duration. The only reason between the two is with Devotus you get much more faster leaps for your leap slam, and with Starcorn you get 100 more life, and this is it. This is literally all the difference. Because Devotus give you 10% reduced global fist damage, which is not really that crazy, guys, trust me. For the skill links, I will put everything in the Path of Building, but I can check you now, but I will let you know these ones in the gloves as well, which are Hatred, Summon Flame Golem purely for the damage, Herald of Ash, and Blood Rage. Blood Rage will degenerate your life, but with leeching it's not really big of a problem, and with the amount of regen we have, we're not Vault packed, so we are mostly regenerating, so you know, out-regening Blood Rage is not a problem. On the helm we have our faster attack, Sleep Slam with Fortify support, and Endurance Charge and melee stun support. I have melee charge here just for the sake of getting more occasional Endurance Charges, which I believe is very useful. Another little trick that I forgot to mention is how you can get much more intelligence and basically outspec of this ancestral knowledge and intelligence, because intelligence is greatly required for concentrated effect as well as increased air effect. You need 111 intelligence for this, and without this I will drop to around like 85, right? So how can we solve the issue with intelligence with a one single click? So basically this is it. There is a gem called Brute Force Solution, and gives us intelligence and transforms passives and radius to intelligence as well. So when we put this here, look how many intelligence we have, guys. So basically this single gem would totally solves the issue with all the intelligence that we need for absolutely anything on the tree. So that's about it, a little trick for you. For the flasks, it's all pretty straightforward. Taste of Hate, physical damage as extra cold damage, physical damage taken as cold damage. Lion's Roar is absolutely no-brainer for any melee build. Another one is Sulfur, and I have my removes bleeding here as well. Another one is a Serious Promise, another absolutely no-brainer at all. Fizz damage as extra chaos damage, and leeching of chaos damage as life as well during flask effect. And the last one is the Blood of the Karui. This is basically for life recovery, because we have quite a bit of life, and it's really cool to have this life recovering very fast. That's about it. You can use something else instead of your Sulfur Flask, but I haven't personally found any good things here, because my resistances is pretty much the same shit. But if you have problems with resistance, you can put any resistance flask that you are missing here instead of the Sulfur Flask. For the Pendant Gods, as a major god, I strongly recommend to use Soul of Arakali, because basically it gives 50% increased recovery rate of life and energy shield if you stop taking damage over time recently. This is absolutely priceless for all Juggernauts, and it's literally impossible to take anything outside of it. For the Minor Gods, however, there can be different options. For most mapping and kind of an easy mapping content, and for all map bosses, I strongly prefer Soul of Tukahama, because while stationed we have additional physical damage reduction up to 8%, and while stationed will also regenerate life up to 2%. This basically allows us to stand in one place and tank all shit with a melee range. All bosses just melee range. Another cool option here is the Soul of Rislata, which gives us flask recovery. This is mostly I use for very sketchy high DPS endgame bosses like the Shaper. This is pretty important. Maybe for the Aziri can also be used as well, because it can't really tank that much. So for endgame and for risky bosses, try to use this, because you might want to run around a bit while you recover your life flasks. This one, Soul of Shikari, I only use once for the Chimera, Shaper Guardian, because and the Snake Face, they literally machine gun me with poison damage, and we don't really have any chaos resistance on us, so poison damage is literally the only thing that can kill you the fastest. That's why immune to poison really helped me to fight Chimera, and that made the fight extremely easier. So only use it in the very specific, you know, situations. Now, is this build hardcore viable or not? Of course it is hardcore viable, because for the most of the endgame content it is extremely tough. You run through most physical damage like it's nothing, but at the same time it can be pretty sketchy to elemental damage, because the resists are not the highest, and it's very hard to cap your resist. You may be running around 70 to 80 like I mentioned. That's why some very high, you know, elemental damage bosses like the Chevron, for example, can really kick your ass. That's why, you know, it's hard to recommend this build for the hardcore, because it takes time to kill the bosses, and bosses are literally all the problem in the build. That's why it takes some time, and the more the boss fight takes, the longer the boss fight takes, the more you are in danger to get some savage hit, to get some crazy elemental hit, some crit or something else. That's why I use this build at your own risk on hardcore. But outside of sketchy you know, content and super endgame bosses like the Shaper, I found this build extremely tough when you really do everything properly. Stack up to 7,000 life. It's not a problem to withstand absolutely any amount of damage outside of, you know, additive increased elemental damage and shit. It's pretty tough build. Now let's talk about the overall effectiveness and the build and come to the conclusions. So for the clear speed, I would give it as 3 out of 5, simply because, you know, it doesn't really have a lot of attack speed. Like I mentioned many times before during this guide, we have the balance between attack speed and duration. That's why the move speed is really not that crazy, even with the blood rage and all the buffs like the onslaught and everything else. It's not the craziest move speed, and the leap slam is not the fastest movement speed skill either. Even though the AoE is pretty decent, there is still kind of not the fastest clear speed. So 3 out of 5 is a moderate clear speed. You will not feel slow, you will feel fine. It's just not the crazy ass wonder that you might potentially expect from any build. For the boss power, I would give it as 2 out of 5, simply because this build is not really as a boss killer. It never was really boss killer. It could kill bosses faster than it is now, definitely, when it was before the nerf that happened after the ascendancy. It could kill bosses much faster than it is now, but also the bosses got much more life and right now than it was before. That's why it's much more problematical to kill bosses. And I really struggled with Shaper. I wanted to prove myself that it's even possible to kill Shaper with this build now in 2018. I did, but it was the absolutely longest, toughest fight I've ever had so far in all my, you know, Path of Exile experience, I guess. So I do not recommend you to try Shaper, although the Guardians are really not a problem at all. The AoE is 3 out of 5, simply because, you know, there are much more better clearing skills like the Kinetic Blast, Reef, and even Sunder is much better with the proccing and all that shit with the AoE. So it's around Cyclone maybe in terms of AoE. It's pretty decent, but it's not crazy. It's not, you know, extra orbital amount of AoE. It's just okay. It's not bad, it's not good, it's just okay. And with increased area effect, I do not feel like it's small or something. It's pretty fine. It pops shit just right. It pops packs left and right. It's okay. It's just not insane. For the toughness, I would potentially wanted to give it 3 out of 5, but then I kind of reconsidered because, you know, I would give it 4 out of 5 for reasons, because the overlap is so fucking easy, and you literally, since you are in a melee range, you are mostly facing bosses in the melee range, tanking them face to face, and this is where you are leeching damage. And even though they're not slayers, it's still very decent. So 4 out of 5, I think it's very decent for toughness, even though it's prone to elemental damage, is still very okay. And as the last thing, I want to thank you guys for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope you enjoyed the memories of the Earthquake build if you played it in the Ascendancy League. And I want to confirm that once again, that the build is still pretty damn viable and a lot of fun. This feeling when you jump into the packs and pop shit left and right, this is just absolutely priceless. And I really like playing this build even now, when even though there are much more faster skills and much stronger skills. I really enjoyed playing this build even now and building this guide for you guys. It was a ton of fun. Thanks for the follow, and thanks for your comments and Twitch follows and subscribing and everything else. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the channel if you wish to see more crazy builds upcoming. Thank you once again, and see you soon.